that, but language is important in a lot of different ways. We can speak with each other, know what's going on, but we have to have, not only do we have a thought process, but we have to have the muscular attempts to do that. In order to talk, you have to be able to move your mouth, your lips, your tongue to make the proper words. Hold your tongue and try to talk. It's very difficult. You can't hardly say anything because it's really bad. Have you seen the little game where they put the appliances in their mouth and do that? I'll bring some of those this week and for Thursday, and we'll have a little fun with them. I have those. Memory. Okay, so how do we put things in memory? What's the kind of memories do we have? Long-term, short-term, and intermediate. We have an intermediate term. So how do you put things in long-term memory? How do you remember something really well?
Repeated.
Repeat it a bunch of times. Okay, that's one good way. Any other way? Traumatic things can do it. Yeah. But memory itself is little bits and pieces of information bouncing around in your brain. Now we have short-term, we have intermediate, and we have long-term memories. But the short-term is basically limited to like 7 to 10, maybe 8 pieces of information. We don't retain it very long. Like if you're looking up a number in a phone book, which you probably don't have any phone books too much anymore, but if you look at the number, you remember it long enough just to put it in your phone and then dial it and then send it. Right? Long term has limitless capacity. You can remember everything in your life if you can bring it back out. It's there. Your body will tell you what's going on with it. So emotional state, whether it's a positive or a negative thing, can make a difference. What do you remember most in your life? Something that is very positive or something that was very traumatic to you? A happy thought or a bad thought? Which one do you remember more?
Bad one.
Bad one? Okay. Not going to ask you what the bad ones were, but is that everybody that way, or do some of you remember something more happy? Think of a really happy thought. Right? Sounds like you're going to start flying away or something, but Peter Pan is not here, so it's not that. But we all have certain happy thoughts, but it's harder to come up with a happy thought or a bunch of happy thoughts than it is to think of a negative thought. Like, that time when I got spanked, or I fell off my bicycle, or, I got yelled at for getting a speeding ticket. Those types of things are really ingrained in our minds. And then if you rehearse things, you go over and over again, like you repeat somebody's name 10 times. You'll remember that name much more than if you just say it once. And then if you can associate things with other processes, like how many of you came up with a mnemonic for the carpal bones when we studied the carpal bones, a simple saying for the carpal bones, right? That's an association. We associate a word with a structure, even if it's not the same word, but it's association. And then we have automatic memory. Our subconscious, we talked about the subconscious getting you home and getting you someplace in your car without you thinking about it. That's the subconscious thought process. Really important for us to remember things for the rest of our lives. You don't want to have to relearn everything. Every time you get on a bicycle, you don't want to have to relearn how to ride it. That would just take too long, right? So we learn it, we prepare for it, and then we have it for the rest of our lives. Declarative memories are very explicit information. This is related to our conscious thoughts and is stored in the context in which it was learned. Did we learn it by reading? Did we see it in a video? Did we actually do it? We were kinetic learners where we touched it? Did you learn that a skunk is fuzzy by touching it, or do you just look at it in a magazine and say, or in an encyclopedia and say, yeah, that's a fuzzy animal? We learn in different ways. Non-declarative memory is less conscious or unconscious. This is through experiences or repetition. You ride your bike, you tie your shoes, all those things. Motor memory, emotional memory, you learn by doing. It's hard to unlearn them. You can't. Once you start tying your shoe, you don't even have to think about it. It's boom, 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 it's tied and you're done. Right? So inside your brain is we have the hippocampus and surrounding temporal bones, temporal lobes that help us to consolidate everything into memory. It can be an emotional area associated with it, but it's all fixed into a kind of a cohesive thought process. Remember when you were born, you have no memories. You don't remember things that are happening in your life or happened in your life, but you store them for later. Everything you did. When you look up and you're a baby, you look up and look at your mom's face, you see her eyes. You know, if she looks happy, she looks sad, you remember those types of things. So you remember what her happy face looks like for the rest of your life. So, and if she has a mean face and she's unhappy, and you do something, you look at her face and you know that she's mad at you, right? Those types of things are always there. So we have procedural memory, which comes from the basal nuclei, and it's basically based on dopamine. It's kind of, you can get these aha memories, right? What is deja vu? Does anybody know what deja vu is?
When you see something over, like that's already happened.
Yeah, like you walk into a room and you go, I've been here before. This is really weird, but I've been here. I know what this is. I know what this place is, right? Has anybody ever done that? Now, according to Neo, it's just a glitch in the matrix, right? But for us, it's a glitch in the brain. It's kind of a repeat of what we already have seen in that split second. When you walk in the room, your eyes take in everything. You may not know it, but it takes in everything in the room. It's like it takes a snapshot of what's going on in there, because you want to be able to go into that room and feel safe. If there's something wrong, you automatically will back out. You don't even have to think about it. You just start feeling uncomfortable and you react. So our brain kind of says, oh, that snapshot, oh, I've already seen that before, because it puts a loop to it. And it keeps on going back. Just like if we play the PowerPoints over and over and over again. You'd say, yeah, I learned that. I saw that already. We have motor memory is in our cerebellum for riding the bicycle and doing those types of things, jumping rope, all that stuff is in there. And then the emotional is in the amygdala. The amygdala is buried inside the brain. That gives us our emotional, whether you're in love or not, or you like food, or the smell of pizza. All those things are related into that area of the brain. Okay? So, memory. Let's talk a little bit more about memory. What's the best way to learn in school? What's the best way to learn in school? Repetition. Okay? So, tell me how you can do that. How can you do that for yourself in school? Make flashcards? Okay. That's a good way to do it. How else, Angel?
If you can play some games that have a lot of reading.
A lot of reading with the games? Okay. What else?
You can listen to it more, but you can just write it down over and over.
That's repetition again, right? Yep, you write it down over and over again. So when we put stuff in a short-term memory, it's only there for a little bit of time. So if you want to study and really learn something, do you do it the night before? The hour before? No, right? It doesn't work that well, because you put it in your short-term or your intermediate memory. So let's say you in our next test and you study, you go, gosh, I got, just put it off. I've been having some fun with my friends. My social life is really awesome. It rocks, and I'm not going to study. And then the night before you go, oh gosh, I got a test. So you book it and you start studying, and about midnight you get tired and say, oh, well, I'll get up at 5 o'clock and I'll study. I'm going to go to sleep for a little while. And so you get up and you study again. You hit it really hard. Maybe you don't get up till 6, but you're all right. You still got time, right? It's not till 9 o'clock or whatever. And then, but on the way to school, you think, I've got it. I think I've got this. I can do well on this test. But on the way to school, you're in a hurry, and a police officer pulls you over. So what happens to your short-term memory? It's gone, right? You're now thinking about, oh gosh, my insurance is going to go up, mom's going to kill me, dad's going to take my car away, all this stuff. Or, I'm going to pay this huge fine. Or am I going to get the money for this? All the way in, you're stewing, you're upset, and you sit down and you don't remember anything because it was just pulled right out of your short-term memory, and something else was put in there. It's like it was too full and you couldn't handle anymore. But if you put that into long-term memory, if you would have studied that 2 weeks or a week prior and you repeated it over and over again and put it in your long-term, wouldn't have mattered what happened, it still would have been there. Those thoughts, those memories, those ideas would still be implanted into your brain and you would not lose them that quickly. See, so procrastination is really cool most of the time because you can put things off and get them done really quick. But in certain cases, it doesn't work very well and actually becomes a detriment to them. So you have to practice long-term memory if you're going to do this for a career. You have to put this in your long-term, not short-term memory. So, protection of the brain. On the outside of our head, we have hair, right? It's one of the biggest protectors of our brain. If you're on a motorcycle and you go skidding across the pavement, the first thing that comes off is your hair. Scrapes right off, right? Then what do we get to? Skin. Give me the layers of the skin. You guys are experts now. Epidermis. Then what? What's the next? Epidermis. Then what? Below that. Dermis. What's below the dermis? Hypodermis. What's below the hypodermis? Muscles. Or in this case, part of it is the aponeurosis. And then what do we have? After the muscles. What's below the muscles? Bones. Okay, periosteum and the bones. And underneath the bones we have a specialized tissue. These are called the meninges. It's a membrane over the top. It's like a tent over the top of your brain. It's formed out of 3 different layers, but it's really tough. If you take it and pull on it, it's kind of like the inside of a football or a basketball. You ever open those up? It's got a bladder inside, a rubber insert, right? And that's what you inflate. That's kind of what this looks like. Very, very tough. You can't hardly tear it. And then below that, in between these little cushion, these little tents, is water. The cerebral spinal fluid, the CFS. It bathes and floats the brain in this water. And then we have the blood-brain barrier. That's really tough to say 30 times. That's really, even 5 times hard. Blood-brain barrier. It's hard to repeat. Yep. So the meninges cover the brain. It helps with contain the cerebral spinal fluid, and it goes up and down the whole spine, all the way from covering your brain, clear down to the bottom of your spinal cord. You have 3 layers: the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. What does it matter what the mater is? Well, the mater is that covering that protects everything, keeps everything in place, anchors the brain toward the skull so it doesn't move very much. This is what it looks like. So we have the skin, the scalp, the periosteum, the bone. Then we have the arachnoid mater, the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater lays right on top of the brain, right on top of the convolutions of the brain. In between there we have these sinuses and filled with fluids. They help to bathe the brain. two layers of connective tissue around the brain form the dura mater, and it is divided up into the falx cerebri, the falx cerebelli, tentorum cerebelli. These are all just little indentations and folds into the skin. Keeps everything in place. Little picture when you take the brain out. This is kind of what it looked like if you had the brain was divided with this the dura mater. Arachnoid mater is the middle layer between the dura mater and the pia mater. It's more of a web-like area, and it has the cerebrospinal fluid in it. Also, it has blood vessels. So, what is a stroke? That's when you miss one in golf. You have another stroke. What does it mean when Grandma had a stroke? Does anybody know somebody had a stroke? Okay. Did you find out what they did? Megan, who was it? Your grandma or grandpa or?
No, my uncle.
Uncle?
I caught it right on time, but he was like in starting stroke.
Hmm.
And he fell and grandma he got him to the hospital and he almost had a stroke and he was
So did you ask what happened to him? So what is a stroke? Sky?
It has to do with the brain. I know that.
Yep.
But I know someone who had a stroke and then right after he had a stroke he had a heart attack.
Okay.
Is it when
Fairly
you-
common. But what is a
Is it when
stroke?
the blood's cut off to a certain part of your brain?
The blood's cut off to a certain part of your brain. That's true. That's very true. So you can have a stroke from a blood clot going to the brain. You can have a stroke from a blood vessel being occluded, being closed off because of arteries, hardening the arteries, arteriosclerosis, or you can have a problem where you're not getting enough blood because there's a blood vessel broken up there. It can cause those types of things. So yeah, it's a problem where the brain is not getting blood, and that causes death to the cells of the brain. And you can usually tell the problem, what part of the brain, by looking at the symptoms of people. If the right side of their body is being affected, it's usually the stroke was in the left side of the brain because of the crossing over in the hindbrain and the brainstem. Pia mater is a very delicate covering over the top of the brain, and it lies right onto the brain and it hooks to the brain itself. It's kind of a very vascularized tissue, but it keeps the everything kind of held in the brain, so it anchors it. Cerebral spinal fluid is a fluid that the brain floats in. It's kind of a watery mix. It has plasma from the blood vessels. It floats your brain, makes it so that it has a buoyancy into your head, and it nourishes the brain and carries chemical signals to the brain. Inside the ventricles we have what they call the coracoid plexus. The choroid plexus help to produce the cerebral spinal fluid. And when it does this, by way of these little cells called the epidermal cells, it produces this fluid, and as the fluid goes out, it always has to be absorbed back in. So what is being produced has to be absorbed in. If it doesn't, your head starts to get bigger. Little babies, when they're small and their sutures haven't locked together yet, if they have too much cerebral spinal fluid being produced, it makes their heads huge. They have what they call hydrocephaly. And it puts pressure on their brain, and it causes a lot of times mental deficiencies, mental retardation. So it makes a problem that way. So they have to go in and they'll put a shunt, a tube from the brain all the way down into the digestive system or into the up above the heart, and drains that fluid off the brain. And then without that pressure, then they can return. Well, they never get back to normal if they had brain damage, but they don't get worse. The blood-brain barrier becomes really important for the things that you eat and the things that you drink and the drugs that you take. This protects the brain from being exposed to toxic chemicals. So let's say that you eat something that is spoiled, right? What's your body going to do? Throw up. Why does it throw up? To get rid of it, right? But why does it keep throwing up? If you've ever seen anybody that's drank too much, they'll throw up. You think, oh, they're done, but they keep throwing up, right? Everything is completely out of their stomach. You know it's gone. Or if you've had the flu, you throw up and all the chunks are gone, all your soup's gone, everything that you've eaten is gone, but you continue to throw up. Why is that? Louder. The acid in your stomach? No, the acid's going to be there irregardlessly in the stomach. But what happens is that the toxins inside your small intestine is being absorbed in your bloodstream, and it's floating around and around inside your body, and the body has to get that toxin out before you can stop throwing up. As long as it detects that toxin in your bloodstream, it will continue to throw up because it thinks it's still in there. It says, well, wait a minute, I'm not getting it out, so it keeps throwing it up. Or it'll start going out the other end. So you get diarrhea and you'll get vomiting all at the same time. You don't know which one to do first, right? So pretty soon you're trying to expel this stuff, but it doesn't go out. So then that's the dry heaps. But sooner or later, the liver, the kidneys, take it out, purify it out of the system, and then you don't have any problems anymore. You stop throwing up. Then you become dehydrated because you've thrown up so much. So that's what a lot of people do when they go out and get the 3-2 flu. You know what that is, right? 3-2 flu? Beer, 3-2 flu. It's 3.2 in Iowa is the percent alcohol, so they call it the 3-2 flu. Okay, so anyway, this is comprised of, this is what this would look like. The brain barrier would look like. It's all locked together with these astrocytes, and it helps to protect around the capillaries so that not everything can come out of the capillaries into the brain. It stops some things. But certain things like anesthesia, drugs, like the THC and marijuana, all that stuff can go through that. It gives you altered. Alcohol can go through it. Barbiturates, all these different things can affect the brain by going through the blood-brain barrier. And to a certain degree, that's all right for certain chemicals, but not others. So it's very selective. Nicotine, anesthesia, the vomiting center, and the hypothalamus are reacted mostly with these. Check on the chemicals coming from that. Concussions. How many of you had a concussion in here? I know one has had one anyway. So concussions are fairly common. Nowadays they're taking a little bit more control of that situation. So what do they do if you have a concussion in football nowadays?
You have a baseline test you have to take.
Yep.
And then you have a test that you take after your head injury.
Yep. So they make you sit there and they'll do a test, and if you're even close, you don't get to play. When I was in school, they didn't have any tests. You played. The coach say, how many fingers am I holding up? You're okay, get in there.
Even if you said you're like 3, get out there.
Yeah. Close enough.
You're
Go.
close.
Close enough. So, yeah, we had a kid, I remember, he was the guard for me, and he got his bell rung really hard. I mean, he got crunched, and he had a concussion. I know he did. So he'd come back to the huddle, and I'd tell him to play, and he'd say, when he got out, I'd say, break, and then he'd go, what do I do? And I said, knock that guy down. I just point to him and said, knock him down. And the other guy knew that I said that too. And so play would be done. He said, did I do it? Did I get him right? I said, yeah, you did good. So after about 3 plays, I told the coach, I said, he's got to come out. He doesn't even know where he's at. And he wasn't. He was just completely gone. But he played three more plays anyway before we cut him out. So concussions can be very traumatic. And now they're finding out. Did you ever see that movie Concuss?
Was that with? Who was that?
with Will Smith.
Yeah, Will Smith.
Really good movie. Kind of tells about how we're kind of coming into our own about knowing about concussions. We know that concussions are bad, but we didn't know the long-term effects of repetitive concussions. They've had people commit suicide, have mental problems because of too many concussions over the years. That can happen if you go to the doctor's office too and fall. It can give you those types of concussions that maybe contusion. That's a little bit more involved. Concussion is just a temporary alteration, but a contusion is a bruising of the brain. It's like if someone would come up and punch you and give you a bruised shoulder or a black eye. That's what it'd be like to your brain. Bruising area. Blood vessels break. Blood pools in that area. It can cause lots of problems. And then we can have the subdural or the subarachnoid hemorrhage between the little dura areas. If you get blood in there, it starts to force the brain down into the spinal cord, and that causes the medulla oblongata to be crushed, and that's the area for breathing, vomiting, heart rate. All that stuff will be ceased to happen if you compress it, if you squish it. So medulla oblongata is very important for those types of things. Same way with cerebral swelling. Head injuries, head trauma, the brain swells. They have to use chemicals to reduce it. They take water and pull it off there. Sometimes they even have to open up the skull and pull the blood out between the tissues so that the brain can kind of return back to a normal. So strokes. We talked a little bit about stroke. It's a blockage, circulation change in the tissues. The tissues die. You don't want your brain to die. Right? That's not a good thing. They say we only use 10% of our brain as it is, and you lose a little bit more of it, you don't have much issues with it, right? You don't have much to do. So if we have a brain problem, it's usually what they call hemiplegia, one side of the body and one side of the brain. So if you have a problem, a stroke on the right side, it's going to affect something on the left, either the sensation or the motor aspects of that side of your body. Same way with the left side of the brain. It will affect the right side of the body. Now sometimes people get what they call the TIAs, the transient ischemic attacks. These are like little mini strokes. It's kind of like an earthquake. It kind of builds up to the big one where it causes lots of problems. That's what these are. They're just kind of a dizziness. You just don't feel right, and then it goes away. And then the next one might be a little bit more intense, but then it goes away. So they think, oh, I'm okay, I'm all right. It's just got a headache. I feel faint, I'm all right. The next thing is, boom, they get this humongous stroke, and the whole side of their body goes limp. Or they die, or they end up in a wheelchair as a kind of a vegetable because of such a traumatic problem. So they have what they call the plasmogenic activator, TPA. If they can get this to somebody that has a stroke really fast, within just a few minutes, up to an hour, that can reverse some of this problems. It doesn't take it away completely, but it will help out with the stroke symptoms. So you want to be able to get to a doctor, call 911 really quick. If you see grandma or grandpa go down, you have some problems, call 911 so they can get there quickly and put this medication in, and maybe they'll survive a little bit better. Okay. Alzheimer's. Does anybody know anybody with Alzheimer's? Yes, Sky.
How many strokes can a person have in order?
I've known people that have 5 or 6. Yep. Just depends on how severe and where they're at in the brain. If they're very deep and they're a big area, it can be life-threatening. If it's just really small, they can recover from it fairly well. So it makes a difference. Alzheimer's, right? This is one of those where you forget your past. You forget your people. You don't know who your kids are, your wife is, those types of things. But you remember what your dog was, who your dog was when you were a little kid. Certain things stand out much more. I used to have a golden retriever, and my brother wanted me to take the golden retriever to the nursing home with him. I said, yeah, I can go with you. So we went into the nursing home, we took the golden retriever in, and there was 3 people sitting there on a couch. An older man and 2 older women. And this one woman said, oh, look, there's Fifi. And she went up and was petting my dog. And, of course, that's not the dog's name, but she was petting him and telling about this dog house, all this story about Fifi. And then she got up, went to the back of the room, and came back. And she, oh, look, there's Fido. She was, Fido's just got this dog, this story about Fido. Forgot everything about just all these things. Completely different story, completely different time in her life. But it was just that part that she remembered. It was still in her brain, but that's the only thing that could come out, is that part. So a lot of times they say that Alzheimer's people, they're there, but they can't put it all together. It's like there was a blockage to getting those things out. They get so frustrated, and it gets to the point where they forget everything, how to even eat. And they have to be fed, and then they die after that. It gets to be progressively worse. And what they're finding is that it's due to calcification in the brain, sclera in the brain, causes these problems. So you have to be careful on what you do, as what you eat, the things that you do. Parkinson's disease. This is what people get. They get the shakes. They'll reach out for something and they'll start shaking really bad, and they can't even grab a glass. Parkinson's, it's a problem with this substantia nigra and dopamine in the brain. It gives the Michael J. Fox. He's got that really bad, and he's controlled it with medicine. Huntington's chorea is a fatal hereditary disease caused because of the protein huntingtin. It destroys the basal nuclei and the cerebral cortex. You start losing your whole brain with that one. It kind of rots it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the spinal cord when we come back on Wednesday, and we'll finish this chapter up and get into the peripheral nervous system.